Good Monday morning. This is Senator Dick Black, Focus on the News. We are at November the 13th, 2023. You can always reach us on Twitter. The address is at SEN Richard Black. Okay, what we want to do today, our prime leadoff topic is entitled Milquetoast Consultants Led Virginia Republicans to Defeat. And I want to talk about that just briefly. It doesn't require, I don't think, too much discussion, but here's what happened in Virginia. We just had very important elections. The Republican Party had the opportunity to seize control of both the House and the Senate. We already had control of the House. But what happened is the Republican Party ran a very top-down campaign. So it was sort of the opposite of what you think of as a capitalist idea. It's more of a socialist idea, this idea that you have this central authority that controls everything down to the ground level, instead of having all of this competition, experimentation, and creativity from the bottom up. So it was quite a bizarre campaign. This is in a year when Democrats have never been more vulnerable than they are right now. Okay, let's just run through where the Democrats stand right now. We're drowning in a sea of enormous debt. We're fighting wars everywhere on the planet. Our borders have absolutely collapsed, and the Biden administration has used the border agents simply as processing agents to send foreign invaders wherever they want throughout the country. So the borders collapse. Crime, this is smash and grab heaven, where mobsters out of the inner cities just go in and they wreck businesses, take sledgehammers, they smash through plate glass and steal everything in sight. Inflation is out of control. I mean, Americans, a lot of American families, particularly poor families, simply can't buy as much food as they wanted. The education system in America has collapsed. We shut down schools for a year, 2 years in some places, just because some kids might catch the sniffles. So we lost 2 years of education. And additionally, our math scores are the lowest they have been in American history. And our reading scores are not much better. Children are simply not learning anything. And instead, the schools are infested with all sorts of perversion, pornography being stocked in their libraries. Voter fraud is rampant all through the country. We have the judicial system, the FBI, Department of Justice, totally politicized. We've got essentially a race war against certain groups in this country. I'm a member of one of them, and anyway, it's a wreck. It's not as though the Republicans didn't have things to run on, but instead, what they did, it's quite a bizarre thing. The decision was made that we would come up with this ingenious solution that we would sort of cut the baby in half and essentially say, okay, we're not enthusiastic about abortion, but how about if we compromise on just killing children after they've reached 15 weeks of gestation? Well, here's the problem with this. Politics, that the grassroots in politics is driven by the extremes, right and left. And on the left, with the abortion issue, you have You have people who literally, they would, if you asked them in a poll, there would be about 15% of the population who would say, I support abortion. They would say, we support abortion at right up until birth. We believe that if a child survives an attempted abortion, that the parent should have the ability to kill that child, to murder that child, even after the child is born alive and capable of survival. So that's on the very far left. And some of those people would say, as one Princeton professor did some years back, that parents should be allowed to evaluate their children up until age 3 and decide whether to dispose of them, just to kill them. So you've got that hardcore. On the other hand, on the right hand, you have people who believe that that life is a gift from God, and that every child, regardless how that child is conceived, is innocent and doesn't deserve to be executed, either in the womb or 3 years later. And so those people are totally against abortion. There probably are about equal numbers of those who are on the very far right and on the very far left. Now, the Democrats, what they have done is they have fired up their base, and that 15% who believe in the death of kids even after they're born. And they basically encouraged them. Republicans have become extremely fearful, and they're cringing about, abortion, what do we do about abortion? And as a consequence, they have tried to compromise. Probably the most dangerous thing that you can do in politics is to campaign for the center. If you campaign for the center, you lose your entire base. So if you look at what happened in Virginia in this election, the consultants for the Republican Party demanded that everybody from the Senate level on down to school board, everybody would run a milquetoast campaign with no substance at all and just say, oh, we want better government. That is basically what it amounted to. And they insisted that no one get fired up about social issues, about the decadence in the schools and all of the stuff that really drives people. How do they think Governor Youngkin got elected? He didn't get elected because he ran a milquetoast campaign. He got elected because, well, frankly, because I gave a 1-minute speech that blew the roof off in Loudoun County at the school board and fired up a nationwide movement of people who believed, hey, we got to stop teaching children in schools to hate one another, and we've got to stop all of the perversion, all of the transgenderism and the LGBT pedophilia and grooming and stuff. And that's how the governor came into office. All of a sudden, the polls turned around and he got in by a small margin, but he made it. Now, what the Republicans did here was the opposite. They compounded it because they made the election and a referendum on abortion. You can't do that. If you get down to where you demand that people take some position on abortion, you're going to lose most everybody, because everybody has a little bit different approach on it, outside of those 2 blocks of maybe 15% on either end. So right at the very end of the campaign, when Republicans should have been pushing the Democrats, showing, how they're promoting racial discord, crime in the streets, inflation, all of these other things, collapse of the school standards. Instead, we create an abortion on how many people believe it would be a cool idea to allow abortions up, after 15 weeks. In other words, to suppress them for the first 15 weeks of pregnancy, and then to say, go with them after that. You don't get people to agree on that. People just don't want to do that. And that's what it came down to. The consultants made the election a referendum on a moderate approach to abortion that from the outset lost a tremendous number of people. So it was one of the most poorly conceived campaigns. Nonetheless, the environment was so conducive to Republicans that we're within one seat in the Senate and one seat in the House. I find that unbelievable in light of this horrific campaign that was run. Here we are, we're still almost within striking distance. So I think it's an important lesson for the National Republican Committee to learn. If you run these milquetoast campaigns targeted at the center, you inevitably will lose every race. And so that's where we are right now. And we'll need to smarten up if we're going to make some progress in this. Now, let me shift over to a couple of other things. We've got a very interesting situation with President Trump's trial. And here's what's going on. The trial, this is a civil trial up in New York. And the civil trial deals with the question of, did Trump claim that his empire was worth more than it is? And the heart of it, really the one issue that really makes or breaks the whole case, is what was the value of Mar-a-Lago, Trump's incredible estate. And now, I didn't even realize this until recently, but the judge accepted as the value of Mar-a-Lago that this phenomenal palace, this in one of the most expensive areas in America, the judge accepted claims by the Attorney General that the Mar-a-Lago mansion estate is worth just $18 million. Now, this is at a time, I mean, it's so incomprehensible that anybody could look at an aerial photo of that mansion and estate and empire, that it would be worth just $18 million. But that was the valuation that was accepted as being proven by this funny judge in New York. The one, he used to be a taxi driver. His opinions are reversed all the time on appeal, and he's primping and preening for the cameras, sort of posing in these very effeminate ways that make him look like not a man. Anyway, the way that the Attorney General proved that $18 million is that the Attorney General took the assessed value in place of the market. In other words, to say the assessed value is the market value. Well, everybody knows. I mean, every homeowner knows that assessed value is not the worth of the house or the worth of the property. It's a very low fractional value that is used for the purpose of computing real estate taxes. Now, there are a number of Palm Beach realtors, and these are big shot people. These are people who are selling homes for $250,000 and that kind of thing. And they tend to all say that at the very lowest, that the property owned by Trump would be $300 million. But I think the consensus seems to be that the actual value is probably somewhere between $1 billion and $1.5 billion. Now, $1 billion, just for a few people who don't tend to focus too much on these, $1 billion is 1,000 million. The judge has accepted that this estate is only worth 18. The realtors who know the true worth of property say it's worth 1,000 instead of 18 millions. So the market value, which is the value that counts to the banks, is 55 times higher than what the Attorney General has proven in that New York courthouse or courtroom. The Attorney General of New York is a political hack. She got elected on a promise to prosecute Trump. She didn't say for what, she didn't know for what, but she knew he was guilty because he was Donald Trump. And I don't think she's a very bright person. She doesn't seem to understand really basic economic facts that homeowners know. Assessed value is not the value of my house. It's not the value of yours. Obviously, Trump's estate is worth much more than she claimed in court. The trial is it's a political show trial. It has no reality to fact. Okay, let me move on to another item here, which I found very interesting. We've spoken about the fact that the whole asylum system has broken down, and it's based on nothing more than a treaty that the United States entered into shortly after the Second World War. The United Nations set up this treaty, and it provided measures whereby people seeking political asylum could be considered and granted that asylum. Well, the U.S. government, the president at that time, signed on and said, "Okay, we'll agree to be governed by all these rules." It's always easier to get really absurd rules passed by signing on to a treaty, so that you don't really have to answer to your own voters about why you've done something so ridiculous. But ever since, this wave of immigration has moved, and today we've just got vast numbers of illegal aliens who are streaming across the border. Well, the same thing is happening in Germany. It's happening in France and Italy and the United Kingdom. It's very interesting what they're doing. Germany, where the chancellor, Olaf Scholz, is extremely unpopular. It looks like his government will probably fall at some point, perhaps in the next year. And he knows that the German people are just terribly distraught over this unbridled immigration, people flooding into the country. They're not Germans, they're foreigners, but they come and they get all the benefits and that kind of thing. So now Chancellor Scholz, because he's felt the heat and he knows that his time in office is coming to an end if he doesn't fix things, suddenly he's taken on an interest in immigration. And he's come up with a solution. And what he has done is he is looking at asking Kenya, Senegal, Morocco, and other African countries to house the asylum seekers. So when somebody comes into Germany asking for asylum, they'll be flown off to Ghana or Kenya or Senegal or someplace, and they will be kept there by the Africans, and they will remain there while their applications are processed, a procedure that the German officials say can take a number of years. The reason that asylum has broken down, of course, is that people flood into countries and they all lie. They're not there because of political persecution. They're there because they want to go from a poor country to a rich country. They want to make money. They want to get on the welfare system. They want the easy life. Now, I'm not saying every single person, every single illegal just wants to be a non-worker, but there are a lot of them who just come and get on welfare, and you know, they make 10 times what they made in their old country. So people claim to be persecuted because immigration lawyers have told them to say that. And but almost nobody, I bet there's not 0.1% of people who are granted asylum who have come here because they were genuinely persecuted. But in any event, Chancellor Scholz is exploring deals to reroute some of these refugees' flows through Africa for months. And the Scholz government has been drafting offers to various governments, according to the Wall Street Journal. And Germany is not the only one. The Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, has announced plans to set up reception centers for asylum seekers, and she plans to send them to Albania, where they get a little tough love. Albania is not a nice country, and its people tend to be a very cruel, you know, extreme Islamic nation, and they need the money. And I think what you will quickly find, if this approach works, is people will say, I don't think I'm being persecuted that badly. I think I want to go back home. Interestingly, the United Kingdom is also doing this, and they have actually begun the process of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda. Now, I don't know if they actually sent them there or if they were on the verge of it and then it was blocked in court. But there's a court dispute over whether UK will be permitted to send immigrants for processing to Rwanda. Apparently, the High Court in the United Kingdom is expected to make a final decision sometime this week, I think. But it does show that people are fed up with immigration, and if governments don't do something about it, people may just do something about the governments. Okay, let's see. Let me touch on another topic here. There was a very interesting article. This is out of the Federalist.com which is a very reliable publication. Here's what happened. You may recall 7 months ago, there was just a terrible attack on a Christian school. It was a Christian elementary school, so it was little children. And there was a transgender woman. She was actually a real biological woman who posed as a man. And this transgender targeted the school children for their white privilege. This is according to the Federalist.com. Now, the FBI and the Tennessee authorities, immediately after the shooting incident, they went into the home of the transgender and they got a manifesto, they called it, drafted by the killer, and kind of explaining or giving some idea of why the killer attacked and murdered children, little children in this Christian school. And it's very interesting what happens when there's a terrible incident like this. The authorities will go in and they'll look and they'll say, is this person someone that we want to label as being inherently evil? Is it a white person? Is it a Christian? Is it a patriot? And if so, anything bad that comes out about that person flashes on the air within hours. But where you have the transgender, where you have a privileged group like the LGBT community and the pedophiles, the groomers, the transgenders, then they will simply ignore Freedom of Information Act, ignore any right of access that the American people have. They'll violate the law and suppress it. And that's what the FBI and what the Tennessee authorities have done. They suppress this bitter transgender hate manifesto. Now, transgenders they tend to be a very violent, mentally disturbed group of people. Just as an example, 1 week ago here in Virginia, a transgender drag queen who describes himself as Portland's premier Anne Frank impersonator was arrested in Virginia for stabbing his father to death. And this is someone who his name was Horowitz. He had written a series of Pride Month articles for the Portland Mercury. He had lived in Portland, Oregon. And he was named, and this is a quote, a queer to watch. And he was named that by an organization called The Advocate. And The Advocate bills itself as the world's leading source of LGBT news. The Advocate has been around for a long time. It tends to be, years ago I studied it when I was trying to block, and I did successfully block gays in the military. And I would read The Advocate, and it was very well written, and of course, very perverse and so forth. But the writers were actually competent reporters. But anyway, those people, the Advocate, looked at him admiringly as a queer to watch. And of course, he's now been arrested for allegedly knifing his father to death. So there's just one more very recent, this is just within a week ago. The transgender tend to be very, very violent, very disturbed people. Well, what happened is, even though the FBI and the Tennessee police, the Nashville police, had hidden and concealed this manifesto it was leaked. And when it was leaked, what do you think happened to the police officers suspected of leaking it? They were all removed from their jobs. 7 police officers were removed. An investigation was put. This is something that by law, the Freedom of Information Act requires that the FBI and that the Tennessee Nashville police requires them to release it by law. And yet, when it's leaked, what do? They go after the people suspected of leaking it instead of going after the people suspected of hiding it from the public. Now, I want to read to you a portion of the manifesto, and I've done this before. I don't use profanity, and I know that many of you don't, but I want to read it so that you see exactly what was said. And this is a portion of it, but it's a very relevant portion. Quote, and this is the transgender writing in her own language. Quote, going to fancy private schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks with their daddy's Mustangs and convertibles, Hale wrote in her Death Day plan, shared by Crowder, who revealed the letter. Quote, I wish to shoot you weak SS dicks with your mop yellow hair. Want to kill you all, little crackers. Bunch of little faggots with your white privileges. Now think of what's going through her hair, her head. This is a transgender. Clearly, she's been indoctrinated by critical race theory to despise children who have yellow hair, who have blonde hair. She has been taught to despise all you little crackers, white children. Little faggots with your white privileges. So she's bought into this notion that somehow one race has privileges and other races are oppressed. What's important is not just what this tells us about the transgender movement, the grotesque sickness of the whole thing, but it tells us the corrosive effect of critical race theory in promoting, engendering hatred, in teaching certain groups that they should walk around with a chip on their shoulders, always looking for somebody else to blame for their own problems instead of picking themselves up by their bootstraps and becoming the best they can be. It's a destructive force that, if it continues, will eventually spell the collapse of the country. And we're seeing it here in a very vivid way with the transgender movement, which magnifies all of the dysfunctionality within our culture. So we're going to have to get control of the direction of our culture, or our culture is not going to support the continued existence of civilization. But in any event, I happen to be actually pretty optimistic that I see room for hope. I see hope in Virginia in the fact that we didn't lose the elections worse than we did, and we're only one member of the Senate, one member of the House down. I think that's almost inconceivable given the terrible campaign that was waged. I see that with what's happening with the pro-Hamas protests that are occurring right now, there's suddenly a wake-up call that diversity is not a strength. It's a condition. A nation has certain people, and you manage with the people that you have, and you try to lift them all up, and you try to give them all the best opportunity that they can have. But beyond a certain point, where you have nothing that unites a country except transfer payments like Social Security and welfare and things like that, if that's really the foundation of your government, and there's no unity of the people, not religious unity, not common belief in a positive view of history, not anything, then you'll see situations where there's a terrible crime that's committed by Hamas when they went and just gunned down lots of people across the border, and you have pro-Israel people who just think this is the most hideous thing they've ever seen. It was hideous. But then you're going to have other people who don't care too much about that. What they do care is many of the historical injustices that have been committed by the Israelis against the Palestinians. Without saying who is right and who's wrong, the fact remains that you have an intellectually violent disagreement, and not a physically violent disagreement at this point, but one that was so dramatic that it, honestly, very few things take me off guard, but this one did. I was quite stunned at the immediate uprising of people in support of Hamas. And so what I see hopeful in this is that the people who fund elections, the extremely wealthy billionaires who actually pay for most of the presidential elections, I have some hope that they'll look and say, wait a minute, this is not working. This whole thing about open borders, immigration, we're going to collapse the United States. It may fragment or whatever. And that's going to be bad for us. That's going to be bad for us. And so even, the government for many years now, the American government's not shown the faintest interest in the welfare and well-being of the people. But they do care about the welfare and well-being of the ultra elite, the billionaire class. And hopefully what we'll see is some convergence of the interest of the globalist billionaires and the people, and they'll begin to reconsider this idea of flooding cheap labor into countries in order to push down wages and to promote the drug trafficking throughout the country. It will hurt them from their perspective, and so they will begin to draw back from those policies of open borders, immigration, and so forth. So anyway, I do see hope. I have no idea what direction things will take. I've recognized since I returned from Vietnam to discover how badly American culture was collapsing even then. And I've watched it just sort of fall, except for the Reagan years, watch it continue to fall. And somewhat in the Trump years also, we pushed back. to some extent there. But anyway, I think we have a chance. I think our country can survive, and I certainly pray that we do find our way back to God, find our way back to fiscal sanity, close the borders, restore moral decency, protect children in the schools and in the womb, and we'll see. Who knows where we'll go, but it's an exciting time, that's for sure. Okay, that's all for today. We'll see you next Monday. This has been Focus on the News. I'm Senator Dick Black, and I will see you next Monday.